From where I sit, because clearly she was trying to put huge pressure on my bosses to take action against me.
You being sort of suspicious and secretive around labor and birth, people theorized and claimed that the couple needed time to stage a story because Meghan didn't actually deliver.
Piers Morgan says the truth about Meghan's pregnancy is finally catching up to her and the receipts are uncomfortable. It starts like this, not with whispers anymore, not with anonymous comments buried in forums, but with Piers Morgan standing there confidently, almost smugly, saying what millions were already thinking but were too afraid to say out loud, that the truth doesn't stay buried forever, that timelines don't bend just because someone wants them to, and that when receipts start stacking up, they don't care how powerful you are. Because for years, this story was treated like a fairy tale you weren't allowed to question. At first glance, Meghan Markle's pregnancy announcement felt like a fairy tale moment. A glowing duchess, hand gently resting on her belly, smiling into the cameras like a modern royal dream come true. This was supposed to be simple. Celebrate the baby, smile for the photos, move on. But almost immediately, something didn't sit quite right, and royal watchers noticed. That image, the glowing duchess, the perfect lighting, the carefully placed hand, it was too perfect, almost cinematic. And at first, everyone clapped, everyone smiled, everyone played along. Because who questions a pregnancy announcement? Who wants to be that person? But something felt off, not wrong enough to scream about.
Like this before, and somehow I remain resolutely uncancelled, but because in the end, I was required to apologize for disbelieving Meghan Markle.
Just wrong enough to make people pause. It started small. One photo here, another there. The bump looked different, not dramatically, but noticeably. Fuller one week, slimmer the next. Higher in one appearance, lower just days later. At first, people tried to be reasonable. Angles, lighting, dresses, posture. All the excuses poured in because people wanted this to make sense. But then it kept happening. Again and again. And again, screenshots started stacking, side-by-side comparisons started circulating, and suddenly people weren't shrugging anymore, they were staring. Because baby bumps don't play musical chairs. One of the earliest details Meghan shared directly or through insiders was her desire for a home birth.
Ironic that you should be entitled not to believe somebody if you don't want to.
If you could speak to Meghan Markle today, what would be the tenor, the tone of that conversation?
It fit the image perfectly. Natural, serene, controlled. Frogmore Cottage became part of the fantasy, a peaceful sanctuary where chaos would never intrude. No hospitals, no crowds, no royal pressure, just candles, quiet, and a perfectly curated moment. And people believed it. Why wouldn't they? The public accepted it without question. Why wouldn't they? Because Meghan had branded herself as the rule breaker, the woman rejecting royal rigidity, the woman choosing her own path. And the home birth wasn't just a plan, it was a statement, until it wasn't. Because then May 6, 2019 arrived and suddenly the entire story flipped. Instead of Frogmore, instead of Serenity, it was the Portland Hospital in London. And listen, hospital births are normal, necessary, safe. That was never the issue. The issue was this: no one explained anything. No update, no medical reasoning, no plans changed, just silence. And silence in royal scandals doesn't soothe, it screams. People noticed because when you build a public narrative around values, you don't get to quietly abandon it overnight and pretend no one saw. And that silence sent people backward, rewatching interviews, re-examining photos, rebuilding timelines. Because when one promise collapses without explanation, people start wondering what else might have been smoke and mirrors. That's when the internet took over. The bump became the main character, and it was behaving strangely. One day, unmistakably pregnant, hands cradling, careful movements, lowering herself.
Sit down with me, with your husband, for an equally long interview to the one you gave Oprah Winfrey. And let me ask you more difficult questions about all your claims. But let me ask you a wider question, which is this. if you hate the royal family that
dramatically into chairs. Days later, climbing stairs easily, pivoting sharply, moving like nothing was different. Yes, pregnancy affects everyone differently, but not like this. Not on camera one day and off camera the next. And once people noticed that pattern, it stopped being about a photo. It became about trust. Online forums exploded, comparison videos went viral, comment sections filled with one question: how does a bump change that fast? Then came the hospital photo delay. 2 full days. Another break from royal tradition, and again, not illegal, not wrong, but unexplained. Controlled. Tight. And when the public feels managed instead of informed, suspicion creeps in. Because confusion is dangerous. Confusion invites speculation, and speculation multiplies when no one shuts it down. Then came the alleged documents. Not gossip, not screenshots, documents. Internal scheduling notes that allegedly tracked movements, appointments, and engagements during the pregnancy. And if they were real, they didn't poke holes in the story. They detonated it. Hospital appointments logged on days when Meghan was photographed attending events across London. Not near misses, not timing overlaps, entire contradictions. And then came the biggest bomb, the day of the supposed hospital arrival. The official story painted it as calm, discreet, private. But the documents allegedly placed her somewhere else entirely. That's when the conversation changed from "this is odd" to "this doesn't add up." And no one denied it. No corrections, no rebuttals, just silence. Enter Piers Morgan, loud, unapologetic, and absolutely enjoying every second of this chaos. He waved papers. He dissected timelines. He accused the narrative itself of being staged. Then came his most explosive claim: multiple versions of the birth announcement were allegedly written before the baby was born. Different scripts, different details, different outcomes. Who pre-writes motherhood like a PR rollout? To him, this wasn't privacy, it was control. And Meghan and Harry didn't respond. No denial, no clarification, no pushback. And in gossip culture, silence isn't innocence, it's gasoline. Because then the Oprah interview resurfaced. What once felt emotional now felt rehearsed. Meghan described pregnancy as lonely, isolated, unsupported, neglected by palace staff. But leaked memos painted a very different picture. Staff allegedly bending over backwards. Immediate compliance. Schedules rearranged. Double shifts worked. Not abandonment. Indulgence. And when critics pointed out that meetings she claimed she was excluded from were allegedly declined by her, that's when the victim narrative cracked. Not shattered, cracked. And cracks spread. Then everything went quiet. No Meghan, no Harry, no spokesperson, no celebrity defenders. For someone known for correcting narratives instantly, the silence was deafening. Supporters started shifting. Not angry, uneasy. Asking, why won't she just explain this? And when explanations disappear, speculation hardens. Harry's silence hurt the most. This was the man who claimed he would always protect his family from false narratives. And yet, nothing. Avoidance doesn't read as strength. It reads as fear. Piers Morgan went frame by frame through the Oprah interview. The pauses, the almost tears, the timing. He argued it wasn't fake, it was practiced. And once viewers saw the pattern, authenticity became suspect. What once felt raw now felt produced. And once that happens, every future claim gets questioned harder. This stopped being about pregnancy. It became about trust. And when trust cracks, it doesn't heal quietly. Picking up exactly where it left off, same flow, same pressure, same unease that just keeps tightening. Once doubt enters the room, it doesn't shout. It sits quietly. It watches. And that's exactly what happened next. People didn't rush to cancel or condemn. They rewatched. They reread. They replayed everything with a different lens. And suddenly moments that once felt emotional started feeling curated. The Oprah interview was no longer untouchable. It became evidence. Viewers noticed the pacing. The pauses that came right before key lines. The emotion that swelled on cue and then receded just as cleanly. Not robotic, not fake, but controlled. Too controlled for something that was supposed to be raw. And when people noticed that the same cadence appeared again and again in other interviews, podcasts, speeches, it shifted perception. Authenticity began to feel rehearsed. What made it worse was timing. Every time pressure mounted, the narrative pivoted. Pregnancy stress, mental health, emotional strain, and look, those things are real. No one denies that. But when they consistently appear right at moments of scrutiny, people start asking uncomfortable questions. Not because they want to be cruel, but because patterns demand explanation. An explanation never came. Instead, the silence deepened. Meghan said nothing. Harry said nothing. The palace stayed quiet. And that vacuum filled fast. Critics reassembled timelines, old photos resurfaced, alleged documents circulated again. And with no official rebuttal, speculation hardened into suspicion. Supporters who once defended her fiercely began softening. You could see it in the comments. The tone changed. It wasn't leave her alone anymore. It was, why won't she clarify? That shift matters because once defenders hesitate, the narrative loses its shield. Harry's role became increasingly uncomfortable. This was the man who framed himself as a warrior against misinformation, a protector, someone who would never allow lies to harm his family. And yet, here was a growing storm, and he stood completely still. No anger, no defense, no statement. In the court of public opinion, that silence felt heavy. Then came the most divisive argument of all, motherhood as armor. The idea wasn't that the pregnancy wasn't real. That's important. The argument was that pregnancy became untouchable ground. Questioning timelines suddenly looked heartless. Asking for clarity became cruelty. And criticism was reframed as abuse. Society is conditioned to protect expectant mothers, to extend grace, to avoid confrontation. And according to critics, that instinct became a powerful shield. Any challenge could be dismissed not on merit, but on morality. And it worked for a while. But once people started noticing how often scrutiny was deflected rather than addressed, the shield weakened. Instead of silencing critics, it energized them. Because the question shifted from why are people attacking her to why does everything need protecting? That's when trust truly fractured. This wasn't about one photo, or one interview, or one inconsistency. It was the accumulation. The shifting birth plans, the unexplained hospital change, the bump comparisons, the alleged scheduling, contradictions, the pre-written announcements, the silence. Each piece alone might have faded. Together, they formed something heavier, doubt that wouldn't dissolve. And doubt lingers. Once people felt the story didn't fully add up, they began reassessing everything that came after. Every emotional appeal was met with skepticism. Every new claim was examined harder. The benefit of the doubt, once freely given, quietly disappeared. That's the real fallout here. Not embarrassment, not headlines, not even scandal in the traditional sense. It's credibility erosion. And credibility, once questioned, never returns the same way. This controversy didn't explode in one dramatic moment. It seeped slowly, persistently, frame by frame, screenshot by screenshot, until the narrative that once felt airtight started leaking from every seam. And the most unsettling part, no one ever closed the door on it. No explanation replaced the silence. No clarification softened the contradictions. No definitive statement shut down the rumors. The story was left unfinished, and unfinished stories haunt public memory far longer than resolved ones. That's why, years later, this conversation still resurfaces. Not because people enjoy tearing someone down, but because unresolved narratives don't stay buried. They resurface when trust cracks, when patterns repeat, when silence speaks louder than words. And that's where this ends, not with a verdict, not with certainty, but with a lingering question that refuses to disappear. When explanation is replaced by silence, doubt fills the gap. And once doubt settles in, it never really leaves. And that lingering doubt does something far more damaging than outrage ever could. It rewires how people see everything that follows. Future interviews aren't heard the same way. Emotional moments don't land the same. Even genuine pain gets filtered through suspicion, not sympathy. That's the price of an unresolved narrative. It poisons the well quietly. What makes this situation so enduring is that it was never officially closed. There was no moment where facts were laid out cleanly and questions were put to rest. Instead, the public was left to assemble fragments on its own. And when people start connecting dots themselves, those conclusions harden fast, whether they're fair or not. This also changed how Meghan and Harry were perceived as storytellers. Once seen as victims bravely reclaiming their truth, they began to look like curators, selectively revealing, strategically withholding. Not liars necessarily, but managers of optics. And once once that perception takes hold, every future narrative feels engineered. That's why this story refuses to fade. It's not fueled by hatred, it's fueled by uncertainty. Humans crave closure. When they don't get it, they revisit the mystery again and again, hoping something finally makes sense. And until someone fills that silence with clarity, real clarity, this question will keep resurfacing, reshaping reputations long after headlines move on.